Hey Patrick, hey Maria.
Hi, Gina.
Sorry if I interrupted your lunch, Patrick.
No, you're good.
Hi.
Hey Maria,
Hello.
Hi.
nice to meet you.
Everything is good. Nice to meet you also. Thank you for inviting me. Everything seems to work fine here. Hopefully I can share also the screen. It seems like the screen, not scream. I think I said.
The
Well,
screen, yes.
sometimes I actually, in the beginning of my research career, I often, when talking about eco-anxiety, I showed the scream by Munch. It's a picture of a person that has anxiety that is very well known. So,
Oh,
but not this
it-
time. I'm going to talk about hope now. So,
Would you like to try and share your screen before we get rolling here?
we can see if it works. Uh, hey, it's a little bit okay. Yeah, there. Good. Now you see it. Or, yeah,
Looks great.
yeah, looks
great.
good.
And then I can stop, perhaps.
Perfect. And it sounds, I can hear you well, and I'm going to make sure that people can use the chat, and I'll be monitoring that throughout, um, and doing more of the tech stuff.
Right. I good also that you can hear me well because I bought some new pair of, this that you can talk into or listen to, but they don't seem to work. So
Oh
unfortunately,
no.
yeah.
Oh,
But often it works well this way also. It's
yeah. Well, yeah, this seems good. Sorry about that.
great.
And do you have any questions?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, we said that I should talk for about 35 to 40 minutes and then questions on that. So, yeah.
Okay,
Perfect. I'll give a
perfect.
very quick introduction and introduce a couple new tools with Clean, and then I'll turn it over to you and we'll get rolling.
Perfect.
Cool. I'm gonna,
Few minutes left, like 5 minutes, something, yeah. So,
yeah, I'm
uh,
gonna turn off my video for just a moment and finish a few bites
yeah,
of
me
corn.
too. But I'm soon back. So.
Perfect.
Sounds
I'll
good.
put that on in just a moment. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. We'll go ahead and get rolling today so as to maximize our time with Dr. Maria Ojala, who is our webinar speaker. We're so grateful can join. Are you in Finland or Sweden right now?
I'm actually in Sweden now, guest researcher, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, everyone, I just wanted to say welcome from the Clean Network, and I wanted to mention that for Clean, we are excited about a couple new tools we have addressing climate change that helps to support educators teaching the new climate literacy principles from NOAA. So if you haven't got a chance to explore that, please do. But today, the pages of interest will most likely be the climate mental health pages. If you'd like to jump into these after the webinar to follow up on the topics that Maria will discuss, I invite you to do so. And I'll throw that in the chat. But without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Maria Ojala. Thank you so much for being here, and we are excited to have you.
Thank you very much. I shall share my screen, and here it is. Hello, everybody, and thank you to the organizers, especially Patrick, for inviting me. I'm really happy to be able to give this speech about hope here today, and I'm also hoping for interesting discussion in the end. So I will talk for about 35 to 40 minutes, and then we have time for questions. And as Patrick has told you, my name is Maria Ojala. I'm since August a full professor in socio-ecological resilience at the FRONT program, Frontiers of Arctic and Global Resilience at University of Oulu in Finland. But I'm still also working 20% as an associate professor docent in psychology at Örebro University in Sweden. And today I'm going to talk about hope, more specifically hope concerning climate change. And you might ask, why is this interesting to study? Well, there has long been talk about that eco-anxiety, climate change anxiety and worry is very common among especially young people in many countries all around the world. And there has also been a discussion what this feeling of anxiety stands for. Could it be something positive, a sign that people are taking this seriously? And could it be a motivating force? Or could it instead lead to feelings of hopelessness and perhaps even lower mental well-being in general? And this is a very complex question, of course, and what research shows right now is that if you are worried about climate change, it seems to be positively related to that you are also more active. But on the other hand, there are also positive relationships to anxiety in general and depression in general. So we don't still actually know what causes what. Is it like action that leads to worry, or worry that leads to action? Or is it like people who in general feel anxious that also get worried about climate change, or is it climate change worry that leads to lower mental well-being in general? So I focus a lot on coping, what people do with these difficult emotions, because as soon as we feel more difficult emotions, we often are not passive, we do something. And these strategies, these thinking strategies, these action strategies could be more important for engagement and well-being than the feelings themselves. So actually 6 years ago, I was in Boulder talking at the Museum of Natural History. I was invited by Professor Louise Chavla, who's a great researcher in the intersection between environmental education and developmental psychology. And I really loved to be there, and it was a really nice visit. But today I'm glad to be here online, and I'm going to take my starting point in a slightly different, difficult emotion, and that is that it seems as if hopelessness is spreading among not only young people but people in general concerning the global future, and particularly in relation to climate change, or at least it is a kind of helplessness and disempowerment. One
Maria,
feel, yeah.
apologies to interrupt here. We're seeing two black boxes, one at the top and one at the side of your slides. It may
Hey.
be a matter of
So you see them. Can I take this away, remote control, perhaps?
that does move it. Yeah.
Can move it, perhaps, like, I think you can take that away. It's usually not showing, but hide video panel. So that is gone now.
Yep, that one's gone.
And hide. Now is the annotator show the appear now. Can take away that. No, it needs to be there up. I hope it will not disturb too much.
And
Unfortunately,
taking the side
yeah.
one helps a lot. If you could just move that one as far up as you can get it, that will be awesome. And that helps a lot. Thank
I
you so much.
cannot move it
That's
any. Okay, great. Yeah, this hopelessness seems to be spreading. And also in my studies, it seems I have worked with this topic for 15 years or something like that. And nowadays, when you ask about hope, not many say that they feel that hopeful. So what is this about? I think that if it comes to worry, anxiety, that could be motivational force also. Hopelessness is hardly something we want to evoke in young people. Why? Well, because it could be that it will lead to passivity. Because if you feel that you cannot do anything, it is a big threat to our ability to mitigate the climate change problem, because we need all actors to be engaged. Young people choose perhaps an occupation that deals with these issues in the future. And it's also a big threat to democracy. It could lead to that you feel that if the world will go under, which is a picture that many young people have about climate change, why it's no point in me being even engaged in other societal issues. I should just focus on myself and my own enjoyment and live for the day. Could lead to extreme actions. Of course, civil disobedience is a part of democracy, but when it could also lead to more violent things, and that is not so good. And perhaps it could also then be a threat to general mental well-being. There are stronger relationships between hopelessness concerning climate change and depression and anxiety in general than it is between worry and these aspects. So not surprisingly, there is a huge interest in hope right now among many actors outside there in society, and not least concerning climate change. But hope could also be a contested concept, and some might think that hope is just something wishful thinking. We need like anger if we should talk about emotions, but I will come back to that and start with we need to know what hope is. Of course, it's a phrase that we use, a concept that we use in everyday life, but from a more scientific perspective, what is hope? And there are many disciplines working with that, from social sciences to also humanities. And we need to define it a little bit. And I'm going to talk about a rather common definition first. And that is the kind of emotional aspect of hope, that it is related to the future, that you can see that there is a possibility for something desirable to come true in the future. So you interpret the future in that way, a problem in that way. And then you can feel this also positive emotion. Lazarus, one researcher in psychology, said that it could also be that the desired goal you feel that is possible to come true, even though the odds are not greatly in favor of it. And if you see here, it's a lot related to uncertainty. Possibility that is not for certain that a good thing will happen or that we can solve a problem. And often we say then, who do research about this concept, if we are certain, then we are actually talking about optimism, not hope. We don't even need hope if we are rather certain about a future outcome. So hope is mostly needed when we stand before really complex and uncertain problems where we are not certain of the outcome. And of course, climate change is such a problem. We know all about all the problems we are standing before. So, and it's not certain what will happen. So we really kind of need this hope. And as you see here, there is also a kind of existential thing related here to hope. Actually, many see hope as an existential concept. And my first study about hope concerning climate change was very quantitative statistics, and it was 12 years ago that it got published. But when I tried the first time, both reviewers that looked at it rejected it, and they said the same thing. What is that? Hope. I mean, it's something theological or something like that. Then, of course, things have changed, and I got that article published, and it's the most cited article of mine. But they still were correct in some way that hope is, in a sense, existential. So philosophers, for instance, say that since we have existential anxiety, we know that we are going to die as humans. And now we perhaps know that the whole humanity is threatened by a problem like climate change. We have existential anxiety and we cannot avoid it. And therefore, we also need hope to be able to live with this anxiety in a constructive manner and also resist it and try to do something about the problems. And it might sound a little bit fluffy and perhaps wishful thinking, but Freire, who was a critical scholar who really, he did not work with climate change, but with societal problems, he said that hope is an ontological necessity. If we give in to fatalism, then it becomes impossible to muster the strength we absolutely need for a fierce struggle that will recreate the world. So he really emphasized that we need hope. It's an existential must. But it is not enough, at least not to transform an unjust society. It needs to be there. We need to have some kind of hope, but we need something more. Of course, also when it comes to climate change. And then a person named Rick Snyder, he's a well-known psychologist who worked with hope, and he developed a theory about hope that is the most well-known in psychology, and that is also used a lot when we are talking about hope and climate change. And he was well aware about this criticism about hope that is just wishful thinking, it will not lead to action. So he wanted to develop this theory to make it closely related to activity, to actions. So he developed a cognitive theory, thinking theory about hope. And I'm going to go through it quickly so that you understand when I'm going to talk about climate change and hope, because many researchers relate to this theory. So Snyder did not work with societal issues. He worked with hope concerning education or when you are sick and things like that, more at an individual level. And he talked about that hope consists of having positive goals, pathways to reach these goals, and agency thinking. So for instance, when it comes to these goals or visions of the future, something positive that we want to happen, and we can feel that there is a possibility that that will happen. He talked about that we only talk about hope when when the goal is important and really valuable for the person. So I might say that I'm hopeful that my favorite chocolate still is there in my nearest grocery store shop, but I don't know. But few would call that real hope, because it's not so important if the chocolate is not there. But for instance, a student in psychology might really hope and feel that there is a possibility that he or she will manage an exam in 1 month's time, and this is something important for that person. So of course, then we could start to talk about hope. These goals could be short-term or long-term. So to manage an exam in 1 month's time, and you feel a possibility that that might happen, that is a rather short-term goal. A more long-term goal could be that I think that there is a possibility that I, in the future, become an influential psychologist that influence society and people's well-being. That is a more long-term goal. And of course, to create a more sustainable society is a really long-term goal, a more abstract. But they are all about hope. And then these goals could also be approach-oriented or preventive. So when it comes to climate change, we often have a goal that we should prevent the worst from happening so that humanity will survive, and as many groups as possible will live a rather decent life. We know that catastrophe will happen and so on, but we still hope to prevent the worst. But many that talk about hope also say that we need something positive, something that we could strive for, approach-oriented goals, like a more sustainable future. Unfortunately, researchers have seen that it's rather seldom that young people, for instance, in school, talk about sustainable futures and how could such a future look like. But both these are about hope. So also this preventive, that we feel that there is a possibility that we can hinder the worst from happening, is a kind of hope. Then this goal can vary in relation to difficulty of attainment. Of course, to manage your exam in 1 month's time could be hard, but it's not so hard as to solve the climate change crisis, so to speak. But when we have these desirable goals, we also, and here we come into this action part, then Snyder said that we need to come up with pathways to reach this desirable goal of future. And a hopeful person can come up with many pathways and be flexible. If one pathway is blocked, then we can come up with new ones. So for instance, this exam, a hopeful person will be engaged. Otherwise, it will be just optimism. That person will come up with a pathway, like I will wake up 8 o'clock in the morning every weekday and study all day. That is one path to manage the exam. I will have study groups with my co-students 3 times a week. That is a pathway. And work with that. And that can, of course, also be the case concerning climate change, that we must come up with different pathways to reach these either a sustainable future or if we phrase it like we want the most negative from not happening. And I will talk about that later. But first, I will go into the third aspect, because Snyder also said that we need something else. When we have identified one pathway, like, okay, I will wake up 8 o'clock in the morning every weekday and study. That is hard. And there will be conflicts. You are tired because you was out partying the night before and so on. So you constantly need to motivate yourself. And when you succeed in motivating yourself, you feel more positive, you feel more hope that you will actually manage the exam. And all these aspects, the desirable future, that you can see a pathway and that you can be active there and that you can motivate yourself to do these things, they will also lead to the positive emotion of hope. And when we feel positive emotions, we become more creative. We can come up with new pathways to manage climate change or manage an exam. So this is the basis for this theory. And now I'm going to talk about mine and other researchers' research concerning hope and climate change. So we will start with these goals and visions. And I think that many of you know that it is rather common today for also climate change researchers in different disciplines to work with artists, with musicians, with different actors outside in society, where we give kind of a possibility to envision a more positive future where we have managed these difficult sustainability problems that we stand before, and that could be totally different than our than how society looks today. And this is really good and important, but I want to start with a warning, because what I and other researchers have seen is, for instance, if you work with this in school, I did interviews with teachers who are engaged in climate change education, and some of them think that emotions has nothing to do with teaching about this issue, but quite many say that it's important to promote hope. But they kind of do it in a often rather shallow way, like wanting to avoid all the difficult emotions that young people feel, climate change anxiety and so on, and very quickly go into like, well, you can for instance, you can save energy in your household, or you can eat climate friendly, and everything will go well. And that could lead to a backlash, especially for the older cohorts of young people. This could work for younger people, but not for late teenagers, young adults, because they know that this problem is really much more complex, and we will not solve it in that way, although it's important to do these things in everyday life also, but it's not the only thing that is needed. So it could lead to that they get an even more cynical view of the adult world. And also, I talked with a researcher at the University of Southern Denmark last week. Brian Giselle is his name, and he works with young people. They write fiction about the future, and often it's very negative pictures. But then when he talks about hope, they often say, well, that is childish. That is not something that they kind of like. And you don't want teenagers to feel that this is childish that you try to promote, because they will then disengage because they want to become mature persons, grown ups. So it could backlash. We actually need to, it's important to talk about the positive visions, but we need to first be with the young kids where they are. And often they have these dystopic views of the future, and we need to deal with that first. And there is actually a theory in psychology, fantasy realization theory, that says about that kind of claim that in order for us to kind of really make a positive vision of the future to come true, we need to yes, visualize that positive future, but we also need to look at the difficulties that are there today and portray them as standing in the way for realize this future. And if we can do this mental contrasting, then we can motivate people in a better way. So we need to also take account of all the negative pictures that, for instance, young people have about climate change and the future. And we can do it in a practical way. For instance, Hicks is an educator, David Hicks from England, who talked about future, how we can deal with future issues in school, but also elsewhere. And he was very inspired by someone called Robert Young, who did studies in the 1960s, future studies. And they both talk about 3 steps that we need to go through. And the first step is to talk about the probable futures, like Brian did, where he let people write about how will the future look like concerning climate change. And it's often dystopic if we do these studies with young people. And often we get a little bit afraid of this, picture. But it's very important to actually deal with that because it's related to hope. Lazarus, who I mentioned before, is a hope theoretician that said that hope is actually a way of coping with difficulties. So without difficulties, no need for hope. So we need to take the starting points in the problems. And also these more philosophers that I talked about, they talked about something that they called critical hope. And they said that critical hope is foremost based in an acknowledgement and a critical understanding of the current situation of the climate change problem, for instance. And then when you can show this, and you can contrast it with more positive visions of the future, then you will understand that you are lacking something in the way we are living today, and this will lead to a longing or hunger for something else, and a hope feeling is born. So critical hope is inherently entangled with these difficult negative emotions, and we need to acknowledge these emotions. And many psychologists today really emphasize that we need to start to listen to young people and to listen to their negative emotions of anxiety, hopelessness, anger, and also accept that they are there and not be afraid of them. And we have the duty to help young people to put words on these difficult emotions about the future. Because when we do so, that is the first step to get some distance from them, to be able to do something constructive with them. And this could be a first step towards hope. And then a warning again, we cannot get stuck in the negative because like my research has shown that there are groups of young people, not the youngest group, fortunately, but late teenagers, young adults that get kind of caught up in rumination. And they do it, they ruminate about climate change and the future in a very passive way, like the world will go under, there is nothing we can do, humanity is evil, so we only have ourselves to blame if we will stop existing, and so on. And this is not positive for action or well-being because it could lead to stress that is really demanding on the body, but it could also be a kind of avoidance or denial of responsibilities. So in a sense, it could be easier to feel this kind of hopelessness because if you do that, you don't need to change your life and start the hard work to try to recreate our society in a more sustainable direction. So in a sense, to really feel hope is more difficult because then we have no excuse for not being part of fighting climate change and standing for a more alternative future. So it's important to, when we have talked about this dystopic view of the future that is often present, let young people actually in different ways, together with artists, with writers, with musicians, in different creative ways, talk about preferable future. How can a sustainable society look like? And you can do it in different ways. They can write, they can paint, they can, yeah, it's just your kind of imagination that sets limits on that. And many philosophers talk about that it should actually be utopian in this kind of stage, this second stage, because when you start really imagining something positive, then these positive emotions will increase of hope, and it will make you more creative, and it could also buffer this negative climate change anxiety from turning into low mental well-being. But of course, we cannot stop there. As I told you, many researchers are working right now with this positive future views, and that is really nice. But we cannot stop there. We need to, then David Hicks says and others, we need also go to the third step, and that is when we return to reality, because often the dystopic and the utopic way of looking at the future are not realistic. So we need to see what is possible to do in the future and what are the pathways, what can we do as humans in different roles to fight climate change and to create a more sustainable future. And these pathways I have worked with in my research rather much. And this is also then the kind of third part of Snyder's, or second part of Snyder's hope theory, that we need these pathways. And I have let young people in different age group first rate themselves if they feel at least a little bit hope about the future, and then they have been able to write about what are the sources of hope, why do they feel hope, what do they perceive as pathways that humanity can take towards a more sustainable future concerning climate change. And what we can see here in this work, and there has also been work done in the United States and England about this that is quite similar, is that they do emphasize that they feel hope because they feel that they can do something. So at an individual level, they feel that, yes, I can, for instance, I know that there has come a report saying that at an individual level, we can eat climate friendly, not throw away food. And this is an effective way that we can fight climate change. If we are individuals not working in this field, like, we can still contribute, or we can save energy at home and so on. And it could also be collective in a way that, both collective that you can influence, you can tell others that it's important to take climate change seriously, but also during. It was not so common when I started my studies about this, but a couple of years ago when Fridays for Future were as biggest, they had a lot of demonstrations all around the world, then young people started to mention collective things also. We can go together demonstrating, we can go together influencing our nearest supermarket to take in more climate friendly food or food and things like that. And that is what Snyder thought about when he created this theory about hope, because he worked with individual problems often. So he perceived pathways that have to do with that you are active. But when it comes to a big problem like climate change, and Snyder did not work with these really big societal problems, we cannot solve it on an individual level. We cannot even solve it in our kind of climate change group that we have. But there is another aspect that is related to hope among young people, and that is trust. So those people that have hope, they say that they have trust in other more powerful actors. They have trust in scientific progress, in technological progress. They have trust in the big climate change movement. They have trust for instance, they have met at least one politician that takes this seriously. So they feel trustful when it comes to that also. And this is very important because as we cannot solve climate change alone, we need to see that other actors are taking their responsibility, and then we can feel that it's worthwhile that we are engaged also concerning this. So this is how this should work in the best case. But of course, trust could also be, in a sense, sorry, now it doesn't work, in a sense, first, I would like to say that trust could also relate back to this existential hope. There are some other philosophers saying that what is specific about hope when compared to other future-oriented concepts is also that hope includes the trust in forces that are more or less beyond one's control. It's also about confronting the limitation of one's agency. But in this case, with climate change, this trust in more powerful actors could actually lead to that you feel that it's worthwhile, that you do something also. But it could also be a false kind of trust that perhaps you For instance, you could base your hope in a denial of the seriousness of climate change. And actually, when I have asked about sources of hope, pathways to hope among young people when it comes to climate change, a small group of young people in all age groups, even among 11, 12 years old, base their hope on this denial. They say that I feel hopeful because the scientists are exaggerating the problem, or the media is doing that, or I feel hopeful because Sweden or Finland are safe countries, and it's perhaps a problem for others, but not for me. And this is, of course, a false kind of hope. And most hope theorists, scholars would claim that this is not real hope, but false hope. And in a sense it is, but I think that is still very important to acknowledge this source of hope. Because if we go back to that, hope is an existential something that we really need, then we could perhaps understand this denial of the seriousness of climate change as a lack of other sources or pathways to hope. So it can give a new view of climate change denial, at least among this younger age cohort, because among this younger age cohort, it's often related to powerlessness, that you cannot influence climate change, you cannot influence societal issues at large. And then we can understand that perhaps it's not enough to give them knowledge about climate change or try to convince them with science. You need to work with hope. You need to give them more constructive and realistic pathway to a more sustainable future. Give them hope. And here we can also see that hope is a little bit kind of dangerous in the sense that since it's related to different cognitions and pathways, and since it is an existential must that we all are striving for, it makes it very tempting for different societal actors to try to manipulate hope regarding societal issues like climate change. For instance, a company might say that buy this product, then we will solve this climate change problem, and give false hope. Or it could be a politician that says, vote for me, and I will kind of show that climate change is just something that researchers have come up with, it's false, and so on. So we need to be careful, and we need to be critical also. What is hope based on? If we just, for instance, ask people, are you hopeful? And they say yes, we can actually say nothing about the relationship to active engagement concerning climate change or not, because some people base their hope, it's a small group, but still on denial of the seriousness, while others base it on more positive sources. And I actually have done quantitative studies where I have quantified this, and I have measured hope based on denial, but also hope based on this more positive trust and trust in yourself, and also an ability to see both the positive and the negative. And what I found here is that hope based in denial was negatively related to private sphere climate engagement, like saving energy or trying to eat climate friendly, and also negatively related to the intention to vote climate friendly. Perhaps not that surprising. But constructive hope was actually positively related to that you also do things in everyday life, and also that you have the intention to vote in the future for candidates or parties that take climate change seriously. So it seems as you need to take account of these sources or pathways of hope in order to know if hope is something positive or negative for climate change engagement. Yeah, now finally, and I'm going to take this very shortly because this is work in progress, I come to the third aspect of hope, namely agency thinking. Often if we work with young people, we perhaps think that it's enough to talk about the negative and help them put words on it, and then give them positive vision and let them work with that, and then give them pathways. This and this you can do, and other actors are doing that. And then you can leave them with, for instance, okay, now Anne will start to try to eat more climate friendly and do more climate friendly food choices. But often this is not enough. If we go to Snyder's hope theory, he says that it's now the hard work starts. Or actually, he didn't work that much with agency thinking, but my reformulation of that is that it's actually agency work. So what I have done here, and I'm going to do more research about this with a doctoral student that I have the luck to supervise at University of Oulu, Sonja Palmo. And we going to look at this hope as agency work. What I have done thus far is to explore how people are highly active concerning, for instance, energy saving, climate-friendly food choices, when it comes to sustainability more generally, also recycling, how they cope with difficulties of trying to live in a sustainable manner in a more or less unsustainable society. And here the work starts, because when we try to live sustainable, we will encounter a lot of conflicts, because our society is rather unsustainable and there are a lot of structures that we clash against. But it also could also be conflicts about that we are tempted to eat, for instance, something that is not so good for the environment or climate change. So I have pinpointed what conflicts do they experience, but foremost, how do they deal with these conflicts or border tensions between the sustainable and the unsustainable. And in this way, hope becomes to constructively deal with these difficulties. And this is what I call then agency work. And I will give 2 examples before I finish this presentation of what we have found thus far. And these are 2 different ways of dealing with conflicts and trying to live sustainable in a more or less unsustainable society. So a person have identified climate-friendly food choices as one pathway towards a more sustainable future and tries this out, but then encounters a conflict. Yes, it is important to do this, but will my actions really count? And now you can deal with that conflict. It's a rather realistic conflict, and you can deal with it in 2 different ways, at least. Or you can deal with it in many different ways, but I'm going to give 2 examples of 2 opposite ways. Quite many deal with this in a black and white way, either or not thinking. So they kind of emphasize this conflict by arguing that if not everyone is making climate-friendly food choices, it's actually no point in me doing it. It will not matter at all. Or if I'm not doing perfect choices all the time, then it's no point in me doing anything. And this way of thinking is well known in psychology, and it will lead to hopelessness and pessimism. And the risk is rather big that you give up here, that you stop trying to do climate-friendly food choices. But you can actually cope with this in another way. Some young people actually cope with this in a dialectical or deontological way. So they, for instance, argue, yes, the problem is there. It's important, but why do my actions do not really perhaps matter? But then they transcend this conflict with a 3rd element, like I can at least be role model for others. Someone needs to start this process, and I can do this. I can show by my actions that it's possible to live more sustainable. I can go out to internet and influence. And even though my friends perhaps are not doing this, there are others like me around there, and collectively we can change things. Or they can argue, for instance, in an ethical way, that the right thing from an ethical perspective is to try to do one's best, and it doesn't really matter what others do. And this seems to be more positive. Then you can really cope with these conflicts in a constructive way, and you will continue to be active. And we will do more survey studies. We have some data showing that we have measured these quantitatively and also show that they are positively related, this dialectical thinking, to climate-friendly actions, while black and white thinking is negatively related to being active. So, of course, in the future, we want to see if there are other constructive and destructive ways of coping with conflicts. We want to really study this kind of hope as agency work. And we also want to then do some intervention studies, either as quasi-experiments or in school or something like that, to see if it works to kind of disrupt these negative ways of coping and to promote these more positive ones, and if that will lead to both the feeling of hope but also to actions, climate change, more climate friendly ways of living your life. Conclusion, hope is complex. It consists of existential, emotional, cognitive, and action components. It's different from optimism. It's related to uncertainty. And if climate change is something positive or not is far too simple. Hope is an existential must, but if it will be positively related to that you are active concerning climate change depends on the different sources or pathways it is based on. Some can be constructive, some less constructive. And for instance, I'm now a guest researcher at the Anthropocene lab at the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, and they have a sub-theme about empirics of hope, where they try to find more hopeful trends that are like based in more science perspectives, that are more realistic, that could also lead to engagement. So that is a very interesting project, and I'm going to be here 2 weeks. But the cognitive aspects of hope, goals, pathways, and agency also make hope vulnerable to manipulation. We need to give students tools to see that different actors are trying to manipulating what they wish for in the future, what pathways that are constructive. And we need to base this kind of in also scientific thinking. And we need more work with hope as agency work, not only with young people, but concerning different actors that are working with climate change and trying to fight it. And we need to promote critical emotional awareness, and that is related to this vulnerability regarding manipulation, that we need to give young people, as I've already told you, the tools to kind of critically assess their hope feelings. Are they realistic? Who are influencing this? Is it realistic also to just feel hopelessness? It's perhaps not realistic either. So emotions are related to conditions and larger social processes, and it's important to discuss that also in school and when we communicate about these issues. Thank you very much for listening. And now we have some time for questions. And I will stop my presentation there. It was a little bit strange because now I did not see anyone. I did not even see myself when I took away the kind of dark thing that disturbed the picture. But I hope it still was possible to understand what I was talking about. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Maria. Really appreciate the presentation and your work as a body of research that I think a lot of us draw on and appreciate. I see that we had one question by Carol in the chat. Carol, if it's okay with you, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you to see if you want to jump in and articulate your question there.
Sure. It seems to me, I'm a former science teacher, science educator and climate educator, and that more recently, it seemed like we were coming up against the sense of futility and having a student sense of agency is critically important. Those people who have a greater external locus of control, who feel like internal locus of control, who feel like their actions do make a difference and that they are in control of some things, seems to help. And so I'm just curious as to how you promote action and understanding among people who are maybe hesitant to do more.
Yeah. Well, I think that it is important, this kind of seeing hope is, it is important to envision positive futures. It's important to find these pathways where you can be engaged and that you can see that others are also doing something that could evoke action to a certain degree, but it's not enough. You also need to work with this agency part. So we cannot just leave the students there when they know about what they can do, and then we think that they will succeed, because I think that then the difficulties will emerge, and they are rather realistic because there are conflicts out there. Our society is not built in a sustainable manner. So then it could be good to let them try and then to act and then come back in the classroom, for instance, and talk about these conflicts and how do you think about, do you deal in this black and white way then? That could be challenged. You can give examples of these more positive strategies. You can critically assess these strategies in different ways and not leave the young people there, but help them to, it's a process. And we often fall back. If we try something new, we kind of, we don't have the stamina to keep it off, but we can try again, and it's a process. So but of course we need more studies about this also, that I was talking about, that do interventions to see if it really works. But there are studies in other fields showing that this could be a way to motivate actions and so on.
You're muted, Patrick.
Ooh, hey, that's good to know. Thanks, Gina. And thanks, Maria.
Yes, sorry, but Carol said that teachers have less time. It's the same in Sweden, unfortunately. So again, we see here that there are structural things also that hinders us, also as teachers and communicators about this, to do these things. So of course, again, we need to also change things, talk critically about how can we as a powerful group, as teachers together, perhaps start to put demand on, that we get time for this and things like that. It's not unchangeable, but it's difficult, of course, but still.
Definitely, there are systems to navigate to enable these steps. So I know Rachel's question came second in the chat, but I saw it come through the Q&A as well a few minutes ago. I'm going to ask Rachel if you'd like to go ahead and jump in with your question here. I will unmute you. You should have the ability to unmute yourself, Rachel, but we can't hear you just
Oh,
yet.
are you able to hear now?
Oh, that's it.
Okay. So I'm at a high school, so I hope it's not too loud. I was wondering, it seems like, trust is a big component of hope, yet feelings of betrayal and lack of trust are really high among youth. And so I'm wondering just your thoughts on that kind of tension. Like, I know meaning focused coping that you talk about really requires trust. So, what are young people finding trust through and kind of how do we foster this sense of trust?
Yeah, but that could be also why young people today seem to feel a lot of hopelessness because they feel betrayed by the adult world. And perhaps they are, to a rather large extent, right when it comes to that. Not totally, because there are adults that are trying to work with climate change and trying to really do their best in managing this problem. And I think as a teacher or communicator, you can help young people to see these good examples and letting them come and meet different actors. Let students go out in society, meet these actors, or the actors to come in. And it could be from different spheres of society. It could be law people that work with environmental laws. They could be politicians that actually take this seriously. It could be climate change movements. It could be scientists and technological development. I think it's very important to show that in every field there are people working with this, and there are some examples in Sweden, like where they have tried this out, and they have not done proper scientific evaluations, but it still seems like when they do interviews and talk with the young people, that they actually, their kind of negative picture of the adult world get a little bit different, than that they can see that it's perhaps there are people taking this seriously, and then they also feel that, yeah, it's worthwhile that I also do something, perhaps. And we are many that try, at least. So yeah.
Thank you. And I'll turn it over to Wanda next with her question. If you want to jump in, Wanda.
Yes, thank you very much. I was wondering, it's something that goes for researchers, but I think also for teachers in a classroom. When you're interviewing or working with young students, or even 16 to 19-year-olds, how do you deal when you see they are in distress? Are there protocols that, for example, researchers could observe when interviewing students about climate change and their emotions about that?
Yeah, of course. We always in Sweden, we have a rather strict ethical kind of process that we need to go through when it comes to research with people, and especially about, like now I'm doing a longitudinal study that is really about also more together with a clinical psychologist about more clinical aspects that is climate change and anxiety related to general low mental well-being. And then we have also, we need to follow a protocol. We need to give them information about that they can contact the school health and so on. But this is something that has actually increased during later years. When I did my first studies, there were no such demands about it, because then you saw climate change anxiety as a normal feeling, not something clinical. So I think it's both positive and negative that it has become stricter. It's negative in the way that we medicalize a normal feeling. Of course, it could lead to distress for some people, and we need to be careful about that. But for most, it's like 80% that, or more, that in some studies that are anxious. And this is a difficult emotion, but it's more like still something that most young people can cope with. Perhaps not in the best way that they will become active, they perhaps distance themselves or something like that. But yes, we need to follow a protocol, and it's rather strict in Sweden to send it into a national ethics committee and things like that. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have time for just one more question, and there's one more in the chat from Lola. She's in a loud place, so she asked that we read it. When interviewing middle schoolers, they express fear of being judged for caring too much. The opinions of others are so important in the teenage years. How do we take this into account when trying to develop project-based environmental education programs?
Now I perhaps did not really get the whole question, but it was about that young people are very influenced by peers and peers, other peers' opinions and things like that. And how do we take that into account? Yeah, that could be, or did I understand it correctly?
The twist, I think, was the fear of being judged for caring too much, that if they really put themselves out there,
Yeah,
they're
too much. Yeah, that was what I did not hear. But yeah, of course, yes, that is also, there are some studies early studies by a sociologist showing that young people especially felt that many were worried about this, as you can see in survey studies, but they didn't talk about it because they were really fearing that they would be their peers would not think they are silly and so on. And it's important then for teachers and for not only teachers, I would say all adults, to help young people, to give them safe spaces where they can talk about this in a respectful manner. And when you start to talk or about this, then you see that others are often feeling the same, actually. But of course, it could be, I mean, if you deal with this in a classroom, for instance, it's not a therapy session. So you could do it in a way that you also actually let young people write about it in an anonymous way and then give it to you as a teacher. And then you don't know who has written the stories, but you can kind of then read it out to the class and show that there are different ways of feeling about it, and that many are worried and how they deal with it. And that could also be a way to avoid that young people feel that ashamed of their feelings and so on. But the more we start to address these negative emotions, the more it becomes something that they understand is not something strange. It's not that they are kind of suffering from some mental disorder or something like that. It's normal feelings when we stand in front of a very big problem.
That's great. And I see that we're at the top of the hour, and I know that it's starting to get late where you are, Maria. So
Yeah, I felt a little bit like, because I have been in Stockholm working all day, that a little bit tired, but still very happy to have been invited to keep this presentation. And if somebody wants to collaborate in the future, I will say, please contact me at, I think I have my email address there, and I'm really open to all kinds of collaborations, both research-wise, but also in outreach activities and things like that. So.
great. Thank you so much. And we'll follow up with you on a couple details, Maria. Maybe we could share your slides if that would be all right with you. We'll post
Yeah,
them.
of course.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll post those with
Thank
you.
you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Maria.
Thanks.